Hello and welcome to the channel. You're probably here because your PS4 Pro sounds like a jet engine is taking off whenever you're using it. So I'm going to show you how to take apart the PS4 Pro and clean it out as well as replace the thermal paste. First thing you're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver and a security bit that fits the PlayStation screws. And we're going to take off this back plate here that's covering the hard drive. That's the first thing you want to do. Then take your Phillips screwdriver and remove this screw here. Once that's out, you can go ahead and slide out the hard drive and put it aside. Now we're going to take the bottom plate off. So you're going to remove this screw that's right here, but it should have a sticker over it if you haven't taken yours apart. If you do remove the sticker, it does void your warranty, but you're going to use a security bit to take that screw out. And then you're going to take the corners here that are on the back of the system and pull up. It's going to make a pop. It's kind of scary, but it's okay. Then you slide it back, and then you can clean that plate off. And we're going to do the top plate. You do the same thing, but from the front corners. Again, it could be fairly tough to pull these, and it's going to make a pop. Don't worry. It is okay. So pop those pieces off and slide the panel back. You can clean that out as well. Now take your compressed air and blow out this fan. And then take your security bit, and we're going to remove this heat plate here. These long screws, keep them aside so that you can put the heat plate back on at the end. If you can't get to this heat plate, you might need to use a tool. I've got a tool that removes these. You can use a butter knife or whatever you have that is going to fit in there, or even a flathead screwdriver. So put that aside and then take your security bit again and remove these two screws, and this is what holds in the power unit on this side. Once that's done, we're going to flip it over and start working on this side. So there are a lot of screws on here that have little arrows that are pointing to them. You're going to remove all of these screws. There's two different types in here. There are the ones with the security bit, and there's ones that are for the Phillips. So take out all of them and put them aside, but separate the two different kinds. Alright, once you're done removing all those screws, we're now going to remove all of the ribbon cables. So there's these little blue plastic tabs. Make sure that you pull on only the blue plastic tabs and not the actual ribbon itself, because you can risk wrecking them and you don't want to do that. So once we get all of these out, this last big one, you actually have to lift the little plastic black tab and then you can pull that one out. Once those are all out, you can remove these wires. They're fairly easy to remove, and then we're going to have to move them aside just so that we can get the plate off of the motherboard. And then you're going to remove this cable here. It is a lot harder, I find, than the other ones are. You can use a tool. I used a couple things here, but it wasn't working, so I used my tweezers, and I was able to wiggle that out of there. Alright, now that that is off, make sure those cables are out of the way, and we can remove this plate. So gently lift up and it will come off no problem. Now we're going to remove these two screws here using your Phillips screwdriver. Once those screws are out, you can go ahead and move this plate off to the side, as well as the plate underneath it. That one doesn't have any screws attached, so it's fairly easy. And we're now going to flip over the system. Just be careful because the power unit is now loose because you have no screws attached to it. So pull that up, and then there's going to be the cable attaching it. Go ahead and pull on that, but don't pull too hard on the cables themselves. Try to get right to the plug-in. Once that's out, you can clean that with some compressed air. And we can go ahead and flip this back over and start working on the motherboard to get to the thermal paste. But before we do that, I just want to pause here because if your PS4 Pro is super dirty, you're going to want to remove this plate to get to the heatsink so that you can remove the pieces of dirt. I didn't do that because mine wasn't that dirty, but if yours is bad, you may need to remove this plate. But I'm going to show you quickly before we move forward on how I removed the dirt from mine. So for myself, I didn't have to remove the metal panel because it wasn't dirty on the other side of this heatsink. So I was just looking through the fan. If you look through the fan, you can actually see if you have any dirt stuck in there. But for myself, I didn't. But if you want to get to that spot, you're going to have to remove that metal panel to get to that part, because it's not exposed without removing that metal panel. So what I did is I used this compressed air, it blew through this side. As you can see, it's coming out the other side. And I didn't have a whole lot of it in there, so I didn't have to worry. But again, if yours is really dirty, you look through this fan, if it looks like it's got a bunch of hair, almost like a lint trap in a dryer, just covered on there, you are going to have to remove the metal panel because you'll have to remove that physically with some tweezers. But I didn't have to do that, so we're all good. Now, back to the motherboard and all that dried out thermal paste. Let's remove that using some isopropyl alcohol. Now you want to make sure this is 99% because if it's the 70% stuff or anything under 99, it means it's diluted with water, and that water will create moisture. You don't want moisture on your motherboard, so make sure 100% that you get that 99% so that you're not having that issue and it can just evaporate. So you may need to use a couple tools. I had to use some tweezers to get some of that stuff out of there, as well as a Q-tip for the finer details. But as you can see, it's removing it. It's a little bit of a process, but it's worth it in the end because you have to remove all of that stuff. Now once that's all removed, you're going to be getting your thermal paste. I just ordered this one on Amazon. It seems to work for everything that I do. And you're going to make a little X across here. I put a little bit much on there, but if you spread this out, you want to make sure it's evenly covering every single spot on here. Now once that's done, we can go ahead and put the motherboard back on. Make sure that it's lined up nicely. Go slow so you don't mix up that thermal paste. Make sure all the ribbons and cables are removed, and we can start the reversal process of putting it back together. Now when you're doing this part, make sure that these screws are done equally on both sides. Don't just tighten one side. You have to tighten it on one side then the other. And now we're going to put this metal panel back on, covering the motherboard. Make sure all the ribbons again and the cables are not in the way because you don't want to crush them in there. And now we can put the screws back in. So the first thing you're going to do is notice that inside these holes, you're going to see some of them are going to show the motherboard through it. And that's where the Phillips head screws are going to go in, and you want to do all of those right at this moment. The security bits actually attached to the plastic framing of the console, so those ones can wait until we put the power unit back in because some of them aren't actually going to attach to anything. If you want to, you can go ahead and put some of those back in that you know are attaching to the frame, but if not, you can wait. So go ahead and attach all the ribbons and cables back to it just the same way that you took them out. And once you have all of those attached, we can flip it over, plug back in the power unit, and we could place it back inside the console itself. Once you have it set in place, go ahead and grab the screws and the metal plate that we took out of it at the beginning of the video, and we can start screwing those back on. This is going to screw the power unit back onto the system itself, flip it over, and now we can put the last of those security screws back into this side. Once all of those screws are in, it's time to put the plates back on. We'll do the bottom one first. Just like you took it off, you're going to put it back on by sliding it on and pushing those back corners. Make sure that everything is lined up nicely. It'll snap into place. And we can put the top one back on. Same thing, slide from the back, pop the two front corners in, and you can put your hard drive back into the system, and we can replace this screw that holds the bottom plate on. We are now into the final steps of putting your system back together. So put this last screw into the hard drive holder. Put this plastic piece back on. It just clips on the same way you took it off. And there you go. Your system should no longer sound like a jet engine taking off. I know it can be very frustrating, so I hope this video helped you fix your console as well. Let me know in the comments below. Comment, like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.